Dobrze, mam informację, że nas widać i słychać, także myślę, że
I've been
możemy...
informed that you can hear us and see us, so hello everybody. I'm Janusz Maruszewski, Strefa Inwestorów Portal. It's the 12th of April 2023, the hour is 10 sharp, and I'd like to invite you to a meeting with the president of the board and a co-founder of the Unimot Group, Adam Sikorski. Mr. President, are you with us? Hello. Hello, everybody. Mr. Editor. So Unimot is a multi-energy group offering various fuels to their customers, offering natural gas, liquefied gas, electricity, including from renewable sources. However, what's particularly important based on our today's meeting is that the company has been growing rapidly through acquisitions. That's precisely what this debate is going to be devoted to, divided into two parts. First, the presentation and a Q&A session that will follow. So I would like to hereby invite you to listen and attend the entire meeting. And now, without further ado, I give the floor to Adam Sikorski. So firstly, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. As Janusz has just mentioned, I'd like to start with a very brief presentation, a kind of a introduction or a kind of a repeat of last year's presentations. We are trying to communicate quite diligently what the acquisition of Lotos Asphalt and Lotos Terminale is about. I suppose this is something that is particularly worthwhile. So what happened? Starting at the beginning of 2023, we took over Lotos Terminale, 9 terminals, already known as those operated by an independent logistics operator, as according to the EU legislation, who took care of the competitiveness in the Polish market after the merger of Lotos Orlen, and was obliged to sell out 9 terminals. And these are the terminals based in Szczecin, Gdańsk, Poznań, Bolesławiec, Czechowice-Dziedzice, Jasno, Piotrków Trybunalski, Rypin, Gutowo, and Gdańsk. Czechowice-Dziedzice and Jasło are the main terminals based in former refining plants in the south of Poland. We operated those in Jasło, Czechowice-Dziedzice, Trzebinia. As of now, the petroleum processing is happening in Trzebinia only, while the Czechowice-Dziedzice and Jasło refining plants that became a part of Lotos in 2020, the processing of petroleum stopped. These terminals were turned into fewer terminals. Additionally, asphalt business, 2 production plants also linked with the south of Poland, refining plants in Czechowice-Dziedzice and Jasło. These are the 2 plants when modified asphalt is produced. We are going to make the most of these assets. Our contract guarantees us deliveries of asphalt to our group for 10 years. Particularly important is the very fact that as we acquire these assets, especially with regard to warehouses, 70% of the volume of these warehouses already subject to contract as far as rental is concerned for Orlen and for Saudi Arabia. So the player that entered the Gdańsk refinery, and 30% we are going to use these assets for in-house basic operations, that is, for trade of fuels. Now, about the payment and our engagement. Our maximum engagement is assessed at 450 million Polish zlotys. This involvement is like that, and there's a question why we don't specify the amount in detail. This is because the price arranged with the seller covers the prices on sellout, and now the adjustment of prices on account of refinancing of some credit matters. There is an upgrading worse for another basis. Lotos incurred a big loan, nearly 100 million Polish zlotys. We are refinancing that via a consortium of banks. Also, a redemption of a part of the investment that Orlen will have to incur in order to adapt their base in Szczecin as far as port terminals are concerned. And a very important mechanism, which we used to disregard a little bit, or at least not communicated, I would like to stress it, is the earn-out mechanism under our purchase contract. As we filed our proposal, we obviously adapted our business model. Our consultant did that precisely, closely collaborating with us, based on which we priced the enterprise, what we were to buy. The seller claimed that as a business, and knowing us as Unimot, which was obviously on the plus side, they believed that more can be reached out of the business, more than we assumed. The EBITDA we assumed was 70 up to 100 million per annum. So with regard to that, we agreed that if those businesses do happen and develop like that, and we have nothing against that, if the profit is higher than it results from our business model assumed, we will share the profit over the next decade with the seller. This is a mechanism that is quite frequently used to adapt prices to actual results, business results. However, I have to say that 18 months ago, roughly, because that's how much it took us from the model and creation, we assumed the inflation would rise. We assumed that interest rates would go up, which, well, evidently affected our pricing and the model we assumed. At that time, it may have seemed conservative a little bit, even though we did not assume it to be conservative. Now, I'm glad that bearing the macroeconomy in mind, we can see that the model really checks. All the more, this is since this is a very big transaction for us, we use a lot of bank involvement, and that's precisely what we assume in the model. Our appraisals were correct. However, we're going to do whatever we can in order to have the profits higher, in which case we'll have to share profits with the seller. But that's not a big problem, obviously. As of now, and we did inform you that the transaction was financed by a consortium of 3 banks. The leader was mBank. Also, our main consultant, transaction consultant, it was with the mBank that we priced the assets, plus PKO BP, PKO SA, the PKO2, PKO banks that joined the consortium. After Python Bank joined the consortium after several months. A non-Poland-based bank, which we were very happy about because it was a confirmation to us that that transaction was actually beneficial to Unimot. It was a transaction that would generate some significant profits. The maximum involvement of banks is 320 million. As of now, we do not pool the credit to full amount. In a communication, we have already announced 260 million pooled. That's based on own contribution, own funds in 180 million. Then we are going to pool the loan additionally for the sake of refinancing of the debts based on terminals, for upgrading one of the bases, as well as for the redemption of investment expenditure. So as of now, our credit line is still free and available. Why we did like this? Well, obviously, there was this market opportunity related to the merger of Lotos and Orlen. Many a time that I underscore that as the biggest independent player in the fuel market would at least have to know what happens on account of this transaction. If the conditions, the market conditions would deteriorate, and if so, we'd have to join this as a stakeholder, and we're not ashamed of that, obviously. This allowed us to complement our value chain. There are different values that we carry, and the contract we signed with a railway freight operator, additional warehouses and bases, that guarantees the business synergies to us. Now, as far as the asphalt market is concerned, we still believe that it's going to grow in Poland on account of the ring road construction plan and the road construction plan announced by the government. We have high hopes for the end of the war in Ukraine to happen soon and the return of the Polish asphalt to that market. even to a higher degree than before the war. The Ukrainian market, as far as asphalt market was concerned, was similar to the Polish market, actually, obviously, prior to the war. As of now, it's significantly smaller. However, since there were Russian and Belarusian suppliers operating before war, we still perceive it as a big opportunity, and we're going to focus, and we are going to be willing to enter this market physically. So, Janusz, that was a kind of a reminder, a very brief reminder on account of the transaction, a kind of a refreshment for the investors. I know that following January 2023, we have further investors joining Unimot. There is a lot of information on the website, but I didn't want you to refer to the website. I just wanted to anchor the Q&A session in certain specific background. And now, open to questions and at your disposal. So thank you very much for the presentation and for this intro. Let's start with the following rather general question, however, very to the point. First, accept my congratulations on the acquisition process. It is closed now. It has been successfully finalized. That happened last, right? So what could you say about Unimot after the transaction, in a follow-up to the transaction? We have been changing, definitely. A family business, as we started as a family business 30 years ago, we never imagined, we never fathomed being capable of building such an organization as we are right now. However, out of our LPG assets over the years, we relied on the ZEDMIOT infrastructure still. Our core business, that is the petroleum oil and biofuels and transaction, obviously we had very good collaboration with Tranquid, actually very good operator with good hub in Radzionków. Or if it pertains to the asphalt market, our approach was always very optimistic. It was something that required importing, and since we assume that we know a thing or two about import, we're going to complement the national market. So we are very, very optimistic as far as market and its growth was concerned. We are keeping an eye on the markets all over the world and how they develop. So a natural stage of development was entering into assets market, fuel bases, refining plants, so logistics hubs, actually processes that were not there 20 years ago, or acquiring carriers, not just road carriers, but also freighters, railway freighters. One of the big fleets of vessels actually belongs to different freighters that operate in fuels. And we've entered that assets as well. Thanks to this kind of growth model, not in terms of size or volume, however, it's not big. In the Central Eastern European market, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We are a big company, big business. We got closer to this typical freighters models, traders model, so to speak, or a kind of a trader 2.0 model, not just purchasing, using external assets, but also relying on fundamental basis of in-house assets that sometimes are heavy, actually. They weight a bit here and now, but after all, you don't have to buy a brewery to have a beer, right? However, today, this is how it works. The market showed us how important it is to have quick access to logistics assets. And it is not always then when you enter a market, you really have to do that. Sometimes you can make use of external assets. A mix of out-of-house and in-house assets actually gives you the biggest flexibility. And we are a kind of trader in the 2.0 version, to be more colloquial. We are traders, however, adapted to new challenges. And these new challenges in the market are first and foremost being capable of responding quickly to turbulences in supply chains. And if we have a supply chain diversified, that's easier. Well, precisely. We are talking about assets, we are talking about ownership structure on a formal level.
Biznes to przede wszystkim ludzie.
On the other hand, we also know that business equals people, obviously. What about this acquisition process? What's the response of the crew of Lotos Terminale as far as the acquisition goes? I think, well, at least I hope and I'm informed that we have already taken a deep breath because we've managed to close the transaction, seal the deal, even though it actually was delayed a couple of months. We assumed it could have been closed in December last year, including all the refining plants. Ramco took over 30% of the Gdańsk terminal. The biofuel company was being sold. However, our transaction, and I'm not afraid to say that, I suppose was the most difficult one. Why was it so? Firstly, Orlen first had to consolidate their hubs. What we purchase as far as the fuel hubs comprises assets of Lotos, 5 hubs, and 3 belong to Orlen. That had to be consolidated, causing that the process had to be very sensitive, actually. Then there was obviously also a very longish process concerning different approvals and consents, not just corporate approvals, but external approvals, permits from at least several ministers, the in-house assets, the Ministry of Infrastructure, and so on and so forth, that had to give their consent to the purchase by Unimot. There were some plots that had to be related to some approvals related to farmland and agricultural management authorities. And meanwhile, there was another act, the Port Act, that came into life, meanwhile, and required the port infrastructure to be officially approved by the state authorities in order to be handed over. And the right of preemption was also something to be considered, especially in the cities of Gdańsk and Szczecin. So it was a really complicated transaction, and I'm all the more happy that we succeeded in sealing the deal. Well, it wouldn't have happened without a very good collaboration between us, the seller, and all the authorities and agencies that had to give their consent and approval to that. As the European Commission put it 2 years ago, we became the suitable buyer. That's precisely what we have become. So as we just said, we have taken a deep breath. As of now, the transaction or the modus operandi of our company is not going to just rely on a strategy for all these assets. The strategy will have been announced within a month, let's say. However, first, we want the management boards participating in those refining works with regard to the assets, even though we obviously know what we want to do with the assets. However, we want the management crews of individual assets, individual businesses to be involved. Not until we actually had bought the assets could we actually get involved in their operation. So we will start with meetings with management boards and with the personnel, and this is going to happen this month. We'd like to try to internally announce our ideas. I hope we can surprise everybody because these are precious assets to us. This is not a kind of a side up, some auxiliary assets. These are core business assets that we, well, spend a lot of money to buy, so they have to earn their share to redeem the credits. They have to be prepared for the future. So, even though some people may be skeptical or emotional, since this is a kind of a partially state-owned company selling their assets and being moved to a privately owned entity, I hope we will not disappoint anybody, and the employees will be happy about a new investor and a new owner. And we'll really keep a tight eye on that, on their operations. As you mentioned, assets and the cooperation between the state, the European Commission, the government, individual ministries, and you, the matters of consents and approval. So thinking about this acquisition, this takeover, we might get an impression, correct I think, that at least partially Unimot has taken over a part of critical infrastructure as far as the fuel security of Poland goes. How do you feel with bearing this responsibility? Yes, we have realized this is big responsibility. However, we have to be fair and square. We've become the third player in the fuel storage market in Poland. It has happened. As a business, we have been analyzed very diligently in detail by different entities, from the seller to the European Commission. We were vetted, we were checked. Our approach to individual items of the infrastructure was verified. We realized that, the W hour, we really have to be ready to deploy our forces whenever the high time comes, even when the darkest hour comes. Since February, 24th of February last year, we are very much involved in supporting Ukraine, such as fuel deliveries, humanitarian and charity support. Not only I, a lot of my people from my personnel are involved into developing logistics, trying to instruct our Ukrainian partners about the management of the logistics, how to deliver fuels to individual areas so that they don't get, so that they don't run out short of fuels. Now, as a company, we are definitely ready to manage the infrastructure. Can we handle matters that are particularly difficult in difficult times when you have to be swift and quick? Well, I hope that nobody has any doubts in this regard. In many countries of Europe, the Netherlands, France, Germany, Spanish, the critical infrastructure is in privately owned hands. Many pipelines are privately managed. A lot of pieces of the critical infrastructure are managed by private companies. I'm actually liberal in terms of economic matters. It is not the case that critical infrastructure has to be managed by state-owned businesses. I believe that privately owned companies manage as well. The state has their own instruments to act quickly and decisively and to take supervision over this infrastructure. And the war in Ukraine actually showed us quite clearly the supervision or other facilities introduced that proved to be effective. We'll definitely collaborate with the state-owned entities with regard to the management of critical infrastructure. And this infrastructure just has to economize, it has to work, it has to pay off. The model of fuel trading has changed since the beginning of the year. The independent fuel operator made their hubs open to the market. They used to be closed, serving as in-house bases to Orlen or to Lotos. Starting January this year, the hubs are open to the market. And at the end of the day, it really helps to keep the competitiveness of the market, especially since there were high emotions and high disputes, very heated discourses with regard to fuel prices in the Polish market. They can go down only and exclusively under the condition that we have very good competition, obviously in a regulated market, because this is a market that is very sensitive to certain exploits and abuses. I hope the state actually manages well in Poland. The grey zone is no longer in Poland starting 2016. There has not been any grey zone in the fuel market in Poland, I suppose. However, we really have to be swift and effective in doing that because it raises a lot of emotions, obviously, especially in Poland. We are all the more motivated to really showcase the fact that there will be no issues on our part. To the contrary, actually, we'll be looking for good solutions for the general good, for the benefit of Poland. Because obviously there are individual spots where we have gaps. Actually, LPG, for instance, let me reveal a bit of a secret. They are not fully prepped to free and seamless diversification, to being wherever we want to be, because there are some gaps to be filled. That obviously is something that has been covered by our strategy for the future in terms of assets to be taken over, the share of LPG be slightly higher, precisely to increase the energy security of the country and obviously to earn some money. Let's be open, let's be fair and square here. We have our shareholders, we have to earn money. But if we can combine these two pursuits, that's perfect. Well, precisely. I'll at least try to ask you about your strategies, even though you've already announced that there will be separate communication to announce it.
Przy samym przejęciu, no bo w teorii fuzje i przejęcia na papierze wyglądają
Let's talk
bardzo...
about acquisition. Mergers and acquisitions look very neat and attractive on paper. However, we all know that in practice they require a lot of time and capital as well. For you personally, what was the biggest challenge? What surprised you the most as far as this acquisition is concerned? I think the length of the process, especially the period since December last year, was the biggest challenge, I suppose. In those transition periods, the operations are, I suppose, most difficult. You can lose your key managers or interest of customers. Fortunately, it didn't happen here, even though our customers in the asphalt market were kind of left out or missed out. They were not sure what would happen. For obvious reasons, we could not provide them with all the information that we held. So the postponement, the delay of the transaction was most certainly a challenge to us. It was a challenge to our personnel. It was a challenge to the management boards of all the companies. We all operated on a kind of a suspended basis. We are not sure on what happens on a daily basis. The management boards of the companies that were ex-Orlen owned companies had really tough job to do. So my big thanks go to them because they really thrived in this period. They survived and they managed well. The previous 4 months were challenging, really. To cut a long story short, another challenge was the communication. Why the delays? Why some things did not work as they should be? Maybe some additional questions and inquiries. We really had to keep that under control. We had to handle, we had to manage it. Sorry to everybody that expected more extensive communication, but we really had to follow our contractual obligations. Speeding things up were really pointless. We really had to rely on the schedule pre-assumed. We really tried to prove that we are reliable. It just needed some time. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't intend to close your stage of development through acquisitions. Lotos Terminale, completed in Friday. Olavion, acquired before that. Olavion, railway freighter. At the beginning of the year, of April, you announce an intent to take over a company operating in the energy raw material market. Yes, we have already signed a preliminary agreement. We announced being interested in coal transport market. And again, this is the part of the Trader 2.0 model. If we think about companies such as Vitol, Lenko, Grafitura, these are the kind of organization we are talking about. They trade in petroleum, liquid fuels. They also have some coal desks and gas ones. On that, even food processing products such as grain or other food oils and so on and so forth. I'll be open with you. The situation that changed last year, obviously related to the war in Ukraine, from our perspective, created some unique opportunities as far as the coal market is concerned. The Eastern market is completely sealed off. 80% of import of coal was redirected or has to be redirected to some other alternative origins. And they are destinations where actually we feel very comfortable at, from the other hemisphere, for instance. We have good relationships with individual businesses operating there. And the same goes with diesel oil. The key to success is access to ports, the terminal, to some logistics assets. We started on a small scale. We established a team of 4 people handling this matter. After several months, we've noticed that actually the market was developing in a direction that we expected it to be. So thinking about what would happen over the next decade, and there is no alternative to coal. Let's be clear about that. Yes, obviously the share of RES-based energy will grow. There will be PV systems supported, and we want to be a part of that. However, if there is no SMRs or large or medium-scale nuclear nuclear power plants, and it's not going to be there, we have to have the base load, and it's going to be based on coal. We will need coal over the next decade. What we also know, and that's a foundation of our operations as well, that sometimes asked why we were so successful in diesel oil. Well, we always say it's easy. Poland has to import 30% of its of consumption. It's not a question whether to import, but who is to import. And that's precisely exactly what pertains to coal. Do we have to import coal? Yes, we do, because our in-house Polish extraction doesn't suffice. So again, the question is not whether there's going to be import of coal, but who will import coal. It would be sinful not to make use of this opportunity, bearing all that in mind, especially since different players, market players changed compared to the situation prior to the war in Ukraine. The biggest players were subsidiary companies of Russian corporations, KTK, SUA, and so on, that went to the sanction list. So we have a new deal here. And as if we are talking about playing cards here, to the table, there are some further companies that decided to sit down and actually shuffle the deck once again, decided to import this raw material. And precisely as with the import of liquid fuels, we'll find our way to this cards table, so to speak. We'll try to diversify our supply chains. Sometimes there are companies that combust their coal that they import because they have more extensive supply chains. However, there are a lot of companies that seek coal from different sources. And again, being this agile trader, even if we don't have the assets, I believe we'll find our place there. And there's two entities that we are planning to acquire. We made some survey into the market, who to merge with, who to collaborate with, and we are talking about people who have multi-annual experience and a DNA that is really similar to ours. One of the conditions of the transaction that we assumed is that they would stay in a team, that we become the partners. 20% of shares of the share capital, they would be owned by those companies. So it is very important because they will be able to actually manage their own companies, not just as observers, but as actual managers. That was very important to us. What I can tell you straight away, even though there are some accusations, what about the ESG of Unimot, since we have been communicating ESG, now this is actually something that we consider to be part of our strategy in terms of former CSR and ESG. We'll try to diversify in this respect. We would really like to develop there, not as an investor, there are not plans as such in this respect, but we really want to make the most of the opportunity. It is not against our ESG, and coal is something that we consider to be a strategic resource to Poland. B2, our subsidiary company, is competent, has import capabilities, access to ports. Why not make use of it?
Grupy Unimot, co do tego nie mamy
It
wątpliwości.
definitely matches well your multi-energy strategy. What about your dividend policy? There's been a lot of investments recently. Can you keep your word as far as sharing the profit with the shareholders? And I mean the profit for 2022? Oh, without a doubt, we will definitely keep our promises. As a company, many years ago, we announced that we want to be a dividend-based company. Obviously, in some years, we can dispute whether dividend should be smaller or larger. However, we always announced at least 30% of dividend. Well, last year, on account of the conditions posed by banks, we did not pay the dividend off. And the final results of the forecast will be announced at the end of April. Based on that, believe that the result that we achieved in 2022, it really allows us to have our own contribution to buy terminals. However, we signed a contract to the purchase of Lotos Terminale in January, not knowing that our 2022 results would be record-breaking. So actually, our money assumed to be used for the own contribution was a kind of provision from last year. So there is space to make some further acquisitions and investments that we have just talked about, plus to share the success with our shareholders through dividend, obviously. So the management board will most definitely request that the supervisory board seconds this motion. Well, I'm a main shareholder, so obviously I will vote for the dividend. I have to be clear. 30% of share, 30% share from the consolidated profit. I believe this is something that our shareholders simply deserve. There is space, there is capacity for the dividend to be paid off. You've mentioned some expectations as far as the takeover of Lotos Terminale is concerned, and the strategy that you would be announcing a few things this year. So maybe I'll manage to convince you to answer my last question in terms of financial matters. What was the first quarter of this year? Well, shortly, the first half of 2023. How do you take... What's your take on the market and the company and its general standing? Okay, let's move back to the strategy, because I suppose not a lot has been said, but we will say more. We'll prepare a lot about that. Let me add one more thing. The transformation, all the transitions that the assets have to go through. Electrification, so the e-vehicles coming up, it seems distant. The green energy seems distant. The carbon neutrality in 2050 seems distant. However, it's not really. I have to underscore the very fact that the infrastructure, such as fuel tanks, for instance, with the consumption dropping, we have to transform these assets. So I've mentioned a bit of about LPG, especially two sites that really deserve the Czechowice-Dziedzice refining plant and the Jasło plant. In order for these industrial plants to find their own place in new reality, maybe hydrogen, maybe some other ideas would be implemented. Life will show how we are going to develop and how the whole transition of the energy market will go about it, whether synthetic fuels or some other alternatives. Well, we're not sure about that. However, coming back to the gist of your question, the first quarter was moderately positive. We'll show some forecasts soon. We mentioned the fact that the results of 2022 were record-breaking. I don't think it would be possible to repeat these results now. The market is stable right now. However, we like variability of market, really, to be honest. We are operating fairly well. We have kept our dynamic of growth. Importantly, as I've already mentioned in many interviews, the 5th of February, the full sanctions on the Russian petroleum-based products caused no disturbances as far as supplies to Unimot are concerned. So we have full access to fuels. So the situation outside our western borders, the Shwedi refining plant that suffered from the lack of supplies from Russia, it caused turbulences in the market. On the other hand, we like turbulences in the market because we make use of that. However, we're kind of anxious about the market situation at the beginning of the year. High prices, big variability, political emotions and turbulences. Questions about the prices in petrol stations, different concepts thought over, such as maximum prices, cap, as in Hungary. It's not going to happen in Poland, I believe. We don't like high prices, really, because consumers are very limited in terms of the sentiment under such conditions. We will announce our forecasts gradually. We think about 2023 as a good year. On account of the delay of the transaction, we lost a few months, Q1, for instance, as far as the development of Lotos Terminale. However, we've been working on that. Our goal is in 2024 to have solid results at Unimot, solid results at the part taken over, Olavion, a new entity really managing very well. We have very positive approach to that business. P2, multi-energy, highly diversified group. That's what we are. Even if there's a slump in one business line, a tiny slump in one business line, we can actually boost the results by more proactive approach in other business lines, even getting at 100 plus, but a kind of a good 100 plus, allowing us to be on the safe side. We always fought for 100 million annually. Oh, we moved to a different level with 500 last year, and we don't want to get to lower levels. We don't want to get to before 2021. That's what I wish to you and the shareholders. Two more questions. Purely technical, but still important question. That would be the first one. You said that in the first quarter, no terminals in your results. What about Q2? Will the terminals be included in your results? Starting from Friday, will it be recognized under the company's financial result? I'm not sure if this is going to be consolidated already. These are the accounting, financing, and matters. That's up to the auditors. Have any presentations? We'll definitely be showing the results based on terminals. The assets are so big that even if they are not consolidated, we'll be informing our shareholders about that. That's what has been working for us and shareholders since Friday. Okay, very last question as far as shareholders are concerned. As far as 2023 goes, what else should the investors and shareholders expect? You mentioned that you'll be announcing your new strategy, new entity in the group. Anything else that we should know to wrap up our meeting? We keep an eye on the market. We have our eyes open wide. We have respect, and we have a very conservative guy here as far as the ministry goes, Filip Kuropatwa, the member of our board and the vice president for financial affairs. Will definitely focus more on RES. We have to transform EV chargers, for instance. Our line in Szyędziszów in Lesser Poland region maybe will increase the production capacity in this respect. I think we will transform reasonably, we'll transform in a smart way. We don't have to hurry up. We don't really have to, spend European money as soon as possible or build a network or system and then think how to handle it. I just think that as the electric vehicle volume and fleet will increase in Poland, we'll also try to adapt to that. Asphalt, that's another thing, very important thing, and I haven't mentioned it yet. And I really would like this to be taken properly. Our asphalt company was mainly focused on selling out the volume that was produced in the Gdańsk refinery. We were a trader. We used to be a trader. We made use of the market opportunity. Now, the combination of these two competences and the team that I have put a lot of my trust in, I know they are fantastic people, acclaimed specialists and excellent experts. That gives us new opportunities to import, to increase export, and that's something we really have to focus on. Well, that's a big piece of a cake that we have grabbed, and we just can't go on. We can't go any further. We don't handle it. So, again, we keep our eyes open wide. Starting last Friday, we've been talking about all these new assets, well, nearly only with our manager. That's our priority today. It has to be our priority. Well, Mr. President, thank you for your presentation and for the talk. Now, on behalf of the investors, shareholders, what I wish to you is consistent development. You are hearing from Adam Sikorski, President of the Management Board and co-founder of the Unimot Capital. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. Thank you very much. I suppose within a month we will return to you with our strategy that will be publicly announced as far as the assets management policy is concerned and the mid-year results. So thank you very much again. Thanks. Till the next time. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us and have a good afternoon.